This is yet another episode from the TGV Global Speaker Series, and our guest for today is Jeremy Au. He's from Singapore. Jeremy is a dedicated investor and entrepreneur focused on transforming lives through his investments and leadership initiatives. With a track record of co founding successful startups, he's a growth driven problem solver and an advocate for authentic leadership. He's currently a venture capitalist with Monks Hill Ventures, investing in startups across Southeast Asia. Recognized by Forbes and Prestige with an MBA from Harvard and a background in economics, Jeremy is a multifaceted individual who combines business acumen with a passion for podcasting and community engagement, with over 40,000 monthly listeners with the Brave podcast at braveseed.com. And the way you spell it is www.bravesea.com. So make sure that you visit his website braveseed.com, and you will find the link in the show notes or the episode description. And as we prepare to delve into our conversation on the topic at hand, unveiling Southeast Asia's startup Goldmine, navigating venture capitalist and entrepreneurship. So it's an exciting twist. First, let us tickle Jeremy's brain. And Jeremy, I'm going to kick off the rapid fire round of random words. I'll mention a few words and I would love to hear the first thing that comes to your mind in response without thinking much. And if you're ready, let's get started.
Yeah.
Okay, comes the first word, curiosity.
Cats.
Invention.
Oh, every day.
Future.
Today.
Book.
Terry Pratchett. Yeah.
Movie.
Terry Pratchett. Yeah.
Food.
Food is Peranakan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wealth.
Family.
Startup.
Life.
Universe.
Nice to hang out in.
The last one is creativity.
Comes when it comes, make sure you have a notepad.
Awesome. So, Jeremy, thanks for participating in the first rapid fire round so sportively. There is one more rapid fire round towards the end of the episode, so stay tuned. And folks, welcome to the Guiding Voice podcast series, where we embark on transformative conversations for a better future. I'm your host, Naveen Samala, dedicated to making the world a better place through valuable discussions that add value not only to your life but also to your career. Thank you so much for tuning in. And Jeremy, hearty welcome to TGV, the Guiding Voice podcast series. Thank you so much for being part of our journey in shaping the careers and lives of millions across the globe. How are you doing today?
It's great. And I love the energy level that we have here today. So looking forward to the rest of this discussion.
Yeah, same here. Pleasure to have you. And it is one of the much awaited conversations. I've been wanting to host people like you who are on the other side of the table, investing in the startups. I would like to get the maximum out of our conversation so that it will be helpful for the fellow entrepreneurs who are really looking for some guidance from reputed VCs like you. And Jeremy, without further ado, let's begin with your success mantra. So please share with us the top 3 things that have contributed to your success so far.
I think first of all is, have great mentors. So always take the opportunity that if you find somebody who's willing to be a mentor or someone that you look up to, take the opportunity to be a good mentee, set up time, have good conversations, be honest, authentic, and don't be afraid, right, to be honest about it, because the truth is, every mentor also wants a mentee to somebody else. So if they're willing to help you, that means they like you, right? And so take the opportunity, and hopefully one day, you help other people, take the next step up as well and be a mentor yourself. I think the second thing that's really about success is the fact that you have to have trade-offs, right? If you say yes to something, you have to say no to something else. So one thing I've said no to is, I was doing my Harvard MBA, and obviously there's so many opportunities, right? You get to see all these like folks like Clayton Christensen, he coined the word disruption. You have, Michael Porter, Porter's 5 Forces, all these like great people there talking. And there's always all these like information sessions and lessons. And one thing I realized was that, I made a rule for myself, which was that if I'm at a party where I can't hear somebody else, I'm not going to be there. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason why is that, I'm really at the party or really at the discussion to really get to know somebody else well. And because of that, if I can't hear them at all because of the music or the sound, then why am I there? And I'm just really honestly just not having a deep conversation. Having a very shallow conversation that's, driven, for example, by alcohol and hanging and socializing. So don't get me wrong, I'll still go to the dance floor and dance a bit. But, at the end of the day, I'd rather have, a smaller or private conversation at home or a dinner party to have that deep conversation. The third thing that's really contributed to success is the fact that, there's always a risk, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that in life, anything you want to do,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably going to screw up at some point of time, small moments and big moments.
Yeah.
And the truth is, you have to do both. Yeah.
Awesome. Jeremy, let's start getting into the VC part of our conversation. I'm really curious, why did you become a VC? Like, has it there been since your childhood, or maybe you started thinking about it during your MBA at Harvard, or when did it actually creep into your mind about becoming any VC?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is I wasn't expecting to be one. I think when I was a founder, I had to pitch a lot of VCs. And I can tell you right now that there were good VCs, there were great VCs, there was below average VCs, and there were terrible VCs that I had to, look to fundraise from, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that as a founder, I was very much focused on my business and, kind of like pretty wary in even as sometimes adversarial with VCs. But after, kind of like selling the company and moving on, I had a 1 year, kind of like earn out period after the acquisition. And so I think it was an interesting dynamic where, I got the opportunity to be a VC and, I thought about it. And to be honest, truth is, I think a big part of why I did it was because Ping Sin, who is my boss, has a
Mm-hmm.
great reputation. So, he reached out and said, hey, is this something that's interesting? I had a conversation with him. I had heard a lot of great things about him as a VC, but also as a coach. And so I think I really took that job because of him, and less so about the VC. But I think for me, the VC side of it was, I think there was an intellectual curiosity, which is like, I've been on one side of the table as a founder. And I felt like going to the other side of the table as a VC would let me kind of understand what was going on. Let me have a bigger view about some of the behaviors that I saw as a founder. So I thought it was just an interesting exploration. And I think what's interesting is that, the opportunity arrived and then I took it and I was like, oh, now I really understand a lot more about what's going on about the region and the dynamics of startups and venture capital fundraising. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And what are some key trends and developments that you have observed in the Southeast Asian venture capital landscape in the last few years?
Yeah, and I think the short answer is that it's growing.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you go back, 10 years ago, there was hardly any venture capital in Southeast Asia, right? And you go deeper, most of it was really in Singapore at that point of time. And, there was very little capital going even to countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, let alone, Malaysia and Thailand. So I thought today, we see that vibrant ecosystem where now there are pre-seed, seed, and sometimes Series A funds all across the whole region. And so I think that's a big trend is that it's been growing. I think obviously there was a little bit of a dip in terms of activity over the past 2 years, ever since America ended zero interest rate policy. But, fundamentally, there's still so many growth industries and sectors that's still possible. So I think Southeast Asia venture capital is very much like trying to figure out, okay, we're not playing by the US playbook. So what are the local opportunities that really exist and how do we deploy capital? Not just to expand it and innovate, but also to do it in a responsible way in light of the current exit environment.
Amazing. And Jeremy, can you also share some success stories of startups in the Southeast Asian market that have thrived with the support of VCs?
Yeah, so I think the classic story, at least right now, is you see Grab as well as GoTo. Both of these are ride-hailing companies that have become possible and have grown over time due to venture capital, right? So all the way from the early stages, all the way to the late stage capital, and eventually going public, right? And so GoTo has gone public on the Indonesia Stock Exchange, and Grab has gone public on the US Stock Exchange. And so I think there's an interesting dynamic where if you think about it, there's so much expertise that needs to be built out in terms of venture capital and the startup founders journey. Whether you start out, you have to figure out whether it makes sense. You have to compete against Uber, for example, in the early days. And then after that, you have to go and build out your regional leadership team, enter new markets, and then eventually bring on a banker to help you with your IPO or SPAC process. Like there's actually a lot of complexity. And so, I think it's really when you have great founders working with great venture capital partners that you're able to have a great exit outcome.
Nice. I think these are some great examples. And let's talk about the sectors or the industries. So in your opinion, are there a particular set of sectors or industries that you believe hold great potential for growth and investment in the region?
Yeah, I think that one particular, sector that I'm been formulating, and you can check out my podcast at www.bravesea.com to check it out for yourself. But really, I think one category is really called what I call corridors, not markets. And what I mean by that is that, in the US, for example, I was working across, our startup was in Boston and New York, right? And so obviously we looked at it as two different markets and we wouldn't really look at it as a corridor. But I think if you look at, for example, Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, right? That's a corridor, right? And there's a lot of travel that happens to and fro in terms of obviously flights and travels and cars, but also in terms of business, models, in terms of multi-country businesses, commodities. I mean, the biggest story I always remember is you have durians traveling from Malaysia, traveling south to Singapore, right? Because Singapore is willing to pay, and then the durians have to ripen in a truck, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that there's actually a corridor dynamic where there's also a corridor, for example, between Japan and Southeast Asia, right? Because they're looking to invest Korea and Southeast Asia. So I think looking at companies that are helping service the corridor, so helping companies, for example, that are headquartered in Japan expand in Southeast Asia. Another example would be like remittances, travel, logistics, shipping. These are all corridors where people are traveling between countries. And these are historically, you normally see three companies. You normally see, the outbound company, and you see the inbound company, and then there's a middleman in between, right? And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to make things happen there.
Awesome. And let's also focus on navigating the complexities of cultural and regulatory differences when expanding businesses in Southeast Asia. So how can startups deal with this kind of cultural complexities as well as regulatory compliance or differences?
Yeah, I think cultural is probably your first thing you encounter, and regulatory tends to be a little bit later. But I think upfront, culturally, the truth is, countries are very different, right? So if you look at, for example, Singapore and Malaysia are quite similar, right? It used to be the same, British Malaya, back in the day, right? So I think there's less cultural difference, to some extent, even though there are some regulatory differences. But I would say that Singapore to Thailand, for example, will have more of a difference compared to Singapore and Malaysia culturally, right? And if you think about it, the flight differences are not too huge, if you think about it. So a lot of people kind of get confused, right? Because they're like, oh, Southeast Asia is just one region, but it's not, right? It's multiple different countries. And if you think about it, you look at Indonesia and Philippines, okay, both of them are island chains, for example, but they're actually really far apart, actually, if you think about it. But there are some similarities, but then there's a lot of differences culturally as well. And so, the way that you're thinking about it has to be thoughtful and mindful of these cultural differences. I think regulatory differences are a little bit more straightforward. I think you just have to ask the regulators and talk to people who've done business in that category and just be like, hey, what do we need to do, right? So I think regulatory is easy, but I think culturally you can see, I've seen some people make some big mistakes because, I think it's a mistake if you're an expatriate who doesn't really understand the local market. And so you don't localize the business properly. And then you end up building the wrong business for a country that's theoretical and not actually the market that you're in, right? So a classic mistake that we had, for example, is, we look at quick commerce, for example, right? So, there's a lot of companies look at US, like, oh, great, a lot of people are doing, 5-minute delivery, right? And then you're like, okay, so let's go to, Southeast Asia and say, hey, what's a 5-minute delivery? And then suddenly, you're moving a bag of rice, across the country. It's a city, and you're not going to make any money in it, right? Example. But the truth is, people want a bag of rice, or people want something I think I'm saying I think there's differences that's important for folks to be thoughtful about.
Got it. Jeremy, now I'm also curious about some memorable success story or a pivot moment in your startup journey, which might have taught you valuable lessons about entrepreneurship.
I think for me, I think about my first business, and there was very much a straightforward. It was a social enterprise. It was a consultancy for the social sector, and I think to myself that my co-founder was somebody that I didn't expect to meet. And what I mean by that was I had actually first met him in secondary school. We were acquaintances, and we didn't hang out, right? He had his friends and I had his friends, but we kind of acquaintances. And then we became very good friends in the army, where we were assigned by chance, to to the same section. So we would sleep on the bed there, and then I'll be on the bed next to him, right? So we were that close, and then we were buddies, right? And so I was even assigned and had to dig a trench with him as well. I don't know if you ever dug a trench, but it's a lot of work, especially when he's tall and wide. So it means you have to dig a deeper trench and wider trench than you normally have to. But yeah, I think when you work with someone like that, you become really good friends. And then fast forward, 5-10 years, and then you become, co-founders, right? Together. I think it's a really wonderful experience that you have. And so I think for entrepreneurship, a lot of it really boils down to serendipity as well. So taking an opportunity to meet people and make special things happen is really important.
And what role does this mentorship and networking play in helping entrepreneurs navigate the complexities of the startup world? Like you mentioned, mentorship has played a critical role in your success, right? But I'm interested in terms of navigating the complexities of the startup world. Do you think mentorship is going to help you go to that next level?
Yeah, I think for me, at the end of the day, entrepreneurs have to do something special, which is they have to make something out of nothing. So what I mean by that is you see a problem, and you want to make a business appear that's going to solve the problem, right? But the truth is, the reason why you call it entrepreneur is because you don't have all the resources that you need to make it happen, right? Otherwise, if you are like Apple and you're like, okay, I want to create, I want to, improve my iPhone 15 to the iPhone 16, that's not entrepreneurship, right? Because you're just innovating, but that's true. But you already have the resources. That's not a founder, right? You're just saying innovating, right? But so I think founders have to create something out of nothing. But the trick is, how do you create something out of nothing? Well, the truth is you have to attract the resources and the people and the support needed to make it happen. And so I think great founders really do a good job in terms of, I wouldn't call it networking, but really being a champion for what they're building and attracting people who want to be on the same journey with them. And that means they have to attract capital, obviously, so they have to attract venture capital or angels or people support them. Also, they have to attract people to work for them, right? Employees, teammates, co-founders. And they also have to attract the attention, right? So whether it's press, customers, partners. So I think that's something that entrepreneurs really have to do and do a great job championing and attracting people to work with them.
Amazing. I loved every bit of this conversation, and it's time for us to add some more spice and some more excitement to the episode. So, Jeremy, I would like to kick off the second rapid fire round with a set of intriguing questions. If you're ready, let's get started.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, here comes the first question. If you could have one gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say?
I would say, bravery is grace under pressure. And the reason why I'm saying that is that I think everybody wants to be brave, right? And I think a lot of people are like, okay, what does it mean? So I think obviously we know someone's brave when they take action, right? So there's some level of grace, right? Professionalism, discipline, where they still take action, right? So there's a certain level of grace that happens there. But the truth is, you are also under pressure, right? Because, if you're brave, but there's no pressure, there's no fear, then you're not being brave, right? You're just, doing a normal day job, right? So I really think about bravery is as, there's a pressure, there's fear, there's shadow, but also you can act with grace and professionalism and discipline.
Superb. Here comes the next one. What is the most exciting startup you have invested in and why?
Yeah, I'm really excited about a company that I invested in. It's called Acme, ACME.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what they're doing is that, this is JX. He's a great guy, super solid. And what he's doing is that he is building on a B2B basis, building financial API automation for businesses to be better able to manage their financial operations workflow across Asia. So I think it's really interesting, very technical, but I think there's an interesting part because if you make companies more efficient, then you help open up a whole bunch of infrastructure. And therefore, as a result, financial products, but also operational products that's available for the region as well.
Super. And can you describe yourself in just one word?
I would say strategic. So I'm very much focused on what are the dynamics that we have to do. And I always
Mm-hmm.
tell people strategy is about what you do.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about what you don't do.
Mm.
And you got to be very, very crisp because about that. Because if you're not strategic, then you end up saying there's just a wish list, right? I want to do everything. I want to be number one. I want to be popular. I want to have friends. I want to have family. Then you go to the company, right?
Yeah.
Want to have market share. We want to be profitable. I think it's underrated about what it takes to be truly strategic. Yeah.
And can you describe the qualities that you look for in a startup pitch in 3 words?
Direct
Mm-hmm.
is one word.
Yeah.
And what I mean by direct is that I think a lot of startups have a lot of like fancy words or a big vision or fluff.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just want people to be very direct. It's like, okay, who is the customer? What is their number one problem? Why do the current solutions not work? How am I solving it? So being very direct as possible is really important
Okay.
because if you're indirect, then it's very hard for us to get to the answer about what the reality of the world is. And the second is experimental.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is that at the end of the day, this startup is an experiment, right? Which is that you
Yeah.
believe that this is going to work, and other people believe it's not going to work. So it's an experiment. So having that flexibility to be like, okay, I'm willing to change this, change that. When I build this out with $1 million, we could discover that this is going to work. And we're going to discover that that's not going to work. And if that's not going to work, then we're going to change it this way. So I think there's a little bit of an idea maze that's happened. So I think a startup pitch needs to be, you can't be like, okay, this is 100% going to work and it's going to make everybody billions of dollars. Okay, sure. But I think just being a little bit thoughtful about what the experiment and the risk points are and the milestones we need to build is really important. So I think experiment is a big part of it. I think the third thing is leadership, right?
Yeah.
So, you're looking for a startup that's really taking leadership on it. And what I mean by that is like, hey, we are willing to engage our customers, lead them. I've already thought about the cohorts. I've already thought about what needs to be done. I've already thought about, so just taking more of a leadership role instead of like a more reactive role, which is like, hey, VC, what do you want to see? Hey, VC, I mean, I'm just saying like, at the end of the day, VCs are here to support founders. And so founders really need to take up that leadership role as much as possible.
Yeah. Great. I loved. So direct, experimental, and leadership are the 3 words.
Yeah.
Jeremy, can you also share an unconventional or unexpected way you have discovered a promising startup? Maybe they might have not come or approached you for pitching. Has it happened like that?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's all kinds of ways that startups can be found, but I think the most fun one was Iterative Scopes. So Jonathan Ng, he and I were both from Boston, and I was at one of those meetings and hanging out, and somebody was like, "Oh, you're Singaporean and you're in Boston, you're a founder. Have you heard of this guy called Jonathan?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know who Jonathan is." you know, and so I kept getting this message about, "Oh, have you met Jonathan or went over in Boston?" So at some point, I found his contact on Facebook, and I just messaged him, and I was like, "Hey, people keep mentioning your name to me, so I figured I'll just, we should hang out and get to know each other, so at least can put a face to a name." And so we end up hanging out, and we end up being good friends in Boston, and both founders. And then eventually, I had an opportunity to invest in this company personally. And so it was great because we moved from strangers who didn't know each other to neighbors who were cooking meals together to eventually having an opportunity to invest in this company, which does computer vision for colonoscopies, right? So
Hmm.
really fascinating company that has grown tremendously with multiple growth rounds so far.
Okay, comes the next bullet. What is the most common mistake you see founders make when pitching to VCs?
Explain the problem. So a lot of founders are very focused on talking about a solution, about why it makes sense, and so forth. But what exactly is the problem that's being solved? Is it a number one problem? Who is that pain in the rear for, right? So there's a lot of theoretical stuff. So sometimes the way they might hide it, would be like, McKinsey says that this market will grow by 50%. I'm like, okay, well, but what's the problem? It's not like all IT services or all generative AI, etc. Right? So what's the problem that's being solved, right?
Yeah. And what will be your one piece of advice to early stage founders?
Self-awareness is important. So the truth is, if you're an early stage founder, you're probably not that good. And what I mean by that is that you're just young. I was an early stage founder, and I look back at myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, Jeremy, like you had no idea how to do so many things, right? So I think it's totally normal for an early stage founder to be less experienced. I was an early stage inexperienced founder. I think what differentiates strong founders versus founders that don't make it, because the truth is only 1 out of 40 startups will eventually become a unicorn, is that if you think about it, it's really about how good the founder is, right?
Yeah.
So if the founder is good and learning and getting stronger, then that team will be able to get there eventually, right? So, but the thing is, if you don't have self-awareness, you won't get there because if you're not self-aware about what you're good at, what you need to improve on, then you can be strong at the moment relative to your peers. But then if you're not self-aware, then eventually there's somebody else who's younger, earlier stage, inexperienced, but they're self-aware. They're going to learn faster and eventually get there.
Yeah, great. And here comes the last bullet out of rapid fire. What is one electronic gadget or a fantasy gadget that you like to see or invent yourself?
So many different things. But I think the one that would be great is that, I'm helping my kid learn kind of like Mandarin right now. So there's a 3-year-old and 1-year-old. So trying to give them exposure. So I think one electronic gadget would be love to see or event is like, hey, is there a way to help them like magically learn languages? I mean, heck, I would love to learn like 1 or 2 more languages as well. I don't think it's really a translator because, a universal translator is good. Don't get me wrong. And I think we're quite close to inventing it anyway because we have ChatGPT with translation stuff. I think we're getting quite close there. But I think, being able to speak in someone else's language and understand what they're saying, the concepts and the jokes and all this other stuff, I think that's quite special, right? So I don't think it's a universal translator, but like kind of like automatic language learner, right? That's a great gadget to have. Yeah.
I loved it. This is one of the unique ideas. I think it's a great startup idea as well.
Yeah.
Good one. Great rapid fire. And let's flip back to the mainstream. So, Jeremy, how can aspiring entrepreneurs find the right resources, support, and funding to kickstart their startup journey? Like, do you have any forums or any groups or anything that you would like to share? Any other resources?
Yeah. Well, happy to join the Brave podcast. We have an active community group there. I also do a lot of writing on, how to fundraise, how to build a company. There's a lot of great interviews that we have with a lot of leaders across Southeast Asia. And, we're slowly building out more and more resources for members, especially on the context of how to fundraise successfully, but also how to reach product market fit as well.
Superb. Fabulous. I loved our conversation. This has been really great. I think it is going to help all the aspiring entrepreneurs and also budding entrepreneurs out there in terms of thinking in the right direction before approaching the VCs. And thank you so much. And before I let you go, please share with me how is your experience being hosted on the Guiding Wise podcast? I think you're on the other side of the table as a podcaster, right? You normally interview and you run your own show. So this time you joined me as a guest being on the other side. So how is it being hosted on my show?
It was great. Thank you so much for hosting me.
All right. So pleasure to talk to you. And I really appreciate you taking time for joining me and by taking time out of your busy schedule and engaging in this enriching conversation and looking forward to many more in future. So really appreciate it, Jeremy.
Thank you so much.
All right. So friends, that was our episode with Jeremy Au. And before we jump into the fun trivia section, we have a quick request. In case if you haven't already subscribed to us, please subscribe to the Guiding Voice podcast from wherever you have tuned in, because subscribing helps you and keeps you updated on new episodes. And if you have enjoyed the conversation and found it useful, please share with at least three of your friends or colleagues who would also like the Guiding Voice. So spread the knowledge and help others grow just like you. All right, so now let's cruise into the trivia segment. And today's trivia is about Southeast Asia. Now that we have had an amazing conversation with a venture capitalist who is investing in Southeast Asia, I thought I would present a few facts which are less known related to Southeast Asia. First one is about mega diverse ecosystems. Southeast Asia is one of the world's most biologically diverse regions, and it is home to an astonishing array of species, including some of the world's rarest and most exotic animals, such as Javan rhinoceros and the Bornean orangutan. Second is about the world's largest archipelago. Indonesia, located in Southeast Asia, is not only the world's fourth most populous country, but also the largest archipelago. It comprises over 17,000 islands, and the country's diverse cultures and languages are spread across this vast maritime nation. Third is about rich culinary heritage. While Thai, Vietnamese, and Chinese cuisines have often take the spotlight, Southeast Asia offers a myriad of lesser known culinary delights. For example, the cuisine of Laos, Cambodia, and Myanmar presents unique and delicious flavors, often influenced by the region's rich history and geography. These cuisines are gaining recognition as global food enthusiasts explore new tastes. So, likewise, if you have any interesting facts related to Southeast Asia, or if you have any tips for startups who are about to approach VCs for funding, I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these topics. So you can comment on YouTube, or you can comment on social media platforms wherever you have found this episode. If you have found it on some audio platforms like Spotify or Apple or any other podcast listening platform. That's it for today. So thank you so much once again for tuning in, and also for being part of our awesome TGV community. Folks, we would love to hear from you. So do not hesitate to share your ideas, feedback, topic recommendations, and guest speaker suggestions either through social media, or you can also email us at theguidingvoiceforyou@gmail.com, and let's create content that resonates with you. I am your host Naveen Samala, a lifelong learner, and my goal is to have impactful conversations that add value not only to your life but also to your career. Until next time, take care, stay inspired, and remember, the future holds great things because the best is yet to come. Goodbye for now. See you all in the next episode with another amazing guest.